Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to kind of change the pace of things here and talk about non-technical things about the fun and interesting worlds of regulations. So we all deal with data, and big data and data science, but at some point we also have to think about the legality. First of all, does anybody know what GDPR is? Okay, so if you do business in the EU, you need to know about GDPR, right? So this is coming, this is the new regulation that affects personal identification or identifiable data for anybody in the EU. So if you're a company not only based in the EU, but a company that processes data for EU citizens, then you fall within this regulation. So I don't know how that applies to people in this room, but it applies to us at WeGoLook. So let me try to get, and apologize the technical difficulties that I've been having. So let's see if I can get my presentation. Yeah, it's just not showing up on this screen because I don't know what I'm doing. Let's go over here. Okay. All right, disclosure. I'm not a security or compliance expert. My favorite one is I'm a new CTO, right? So I've been doing this for about 2 months now. This project that I'm working on, worrying about the GDPR and expansion into the UK is something that I inherited. So I'm trying to get up to speed on what all this means to me and my company. And so like I tell lots of people about lightning talks, I'm using this as a learning experience, right? So I put myself on the hook to give this presentation today so that I could learn about GDPR and so help guide my company on what we're doing. So what is GDPR? So if you take 2 things away, right? One, there's a heavy penalty for your company if you don't fall within the regulations of this, right? So it's 4% of your annual global revenue. That's a lot of money, depending on what company you're with, right? For us, we're WeGoLook, but we have a parent company, Crawford and Company, which is a $1.1 billion in revenue company. So that could be a significant fine of up to $44 million at the very extreme, right? So really that's my scare tactic on, how you should take this seriously. And then again, not only is there steep penalties, but it applies to all companies processing data for EU citizens. So brief, boring history. This was defined in 2016, and they were given companies 2 years to comply. So this compliance comes into effect the 25th of May. Who does it affect? Like I mentioned, it's not only companies in the EU, but any company that processes EU citizens' data. So what's personal data? Shing, what do you think personal data is? Yes, that's good. Yeah, so it's anything that can identify you as a person, right? And it can be anything from, right, like a social security number, but even like your Facebook posts, your social media threads, anything that you can think of that can tie you back. I'm sorry? Oh yeah, absolutely, credit card numbers. So what's the change? Like I mentioned, the scope has changed, right? So now it's not only companies in the EU, it's every company that processes their data. Penalties, like I mentioned, are steep. It's 4% of your annual global revenue or 20 million euros, which I think is like 24.5 million US dollars, whichever is greater. You have to get consent now. And for a lot of companies do this already, but you have to be upfront, clear, and concise with anybody that you're gathering data from. You have to let them know what data you're getting, or what data you're gathering, what data you're storing, and what you're going to do with that data. And not only do you have to do that as the controller of that data, you also have to disclose any of your sub-processors of that data, right? So if you're sending somebody's data to get, in another cloud service, you have to provide what cloud service you're sending that data to and what it's being used for. Breach notifications, so now you have to have notification within 72 hours of a breach. And you have to tell anybody of a breach that was affected with undue, as soon as possible, basically. Right to access. All right, so this is back to the consent. You have to let the people know what you're collecting the data for. And then you also have to be able to provide a mechanism for them to get a copy of their personal data. So you have to, give some type of web portal, some type of call line, something where somebody can request what personal data that you have of theirs, and you have to be able to return an electronic format of that data within 1 month period. So there's the right to be forgotten. So for data that you capture that there's no legal reason for you to hold on to it, one of your clients has the right to ask to be forgotten, right? So to be erased from your system and your sub-processing system. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be erased. It could be anonymized. So you could just totally anonymize the data, keep your, differential integrity of your databases intact, but you have to get rid of anything that could identify that person back to who they actually are. Data portability, so this is if you're a system that there's a competing system, you have to provide the mechanism to pull all of your personal data from that system and have it transportable into another system. So if there are two similar companies, you can go from one to the next. Privacy by design, this is kind of just, making sure that you design your applications in a secure manner like we all should be. Data minimization, so this is the process of going through all of your applications and making sure you're only capturing the amount of information that you need to be and no, extra details that you can't really justify. There's this data protection officer that if you are an authority or you process certain types of data, you have to have a data processing officer now. We at WeGoLook, we're going to go ahead and repurpose our compliance and security officer. We're going to give him the DPO title as well. Might as well get ahead of it, before anything comes down. And this is just a neat term. Can anybody tell me what this word means or how to even pronounce it? Pseudo what? Pseudonymization. Yes, this is the process of transforming personal data in a way that resulting data cannot be attributed to a specific data subject without the use of additional information, i.e. encryption or tokenization, right? And so this is something that the GDPR highly recommends. Any questions so far? I'm kind of just like going all through this.
So I'm assuming in the case with WeGoLook that this applies mainly to clients and customers of WeGoLook, but do these changes also apply to employees that work within those countries, not employees of the companies that are working there, or just the customers and clients?
It's really just the customers and clients that this covers. I'm sure if you have your employees' information, that needs to be secured and covered as well, but this is primarily for companies to protect the data of their clients, right?
If you scrape public information about individuals, like on their Facebook page or whatever, how does that?
You have to get consent.
Okay, so even if it's publicly available on the web, you can look out and look at it, and it's not private, that would still.
Well, I think in that case, you have to make it known what you're actually capturing, and then you have to provide the mechanism for anybody to come and request that data that you scraped, right?
Even though they may not have filled out a form for you to have gotten that in the first place.
Right. This is a gray area, and I'm kind of stretching on what I'm answering on this one, so let me get back to you on that. The question was, what are the, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase, but what's the responsibility of the company that is scraping data from public data sources? So scraping data from like Facebook or something like that and doing some type of aggregate on that, correct?
Right.
Right. Not an expert in that area, sorry. So what about Brexit? The recommendation now is just go ahead and treat the UK like the EU and put in the same practices and procedures in place. UK is saying that they're going to go this way anyway, so it's better safe than sorry. Here's a cool little graphic that I found. I don't really have a reason for putting it in here besides that it kind of, puts into visualization what all we're talking about. And I'll provide this as part of my slide deck, but it's at a high level, this is like something good to put on your, like by your cube or in your office to kind of keep in mind of what GDPR is. And I'll let Lucas take a photo.
What does it actually stand for?
Oh, that's a good question. General Data Protection Regulation. Sorry, I should have said that when I was giving the definition, but thanks for calling me out. So why does WeGoLook care, right? And who is WeGoLook? For you guys that don't know, we're an on-demand workforce. That's kind of our little slogan there. What we do is asset verification, right? So we were born out of an idea that our CEO, co-founder, Robin Smith, came up with. She had a need to have a look at a projector. She wanted to make sure that a projector was as advertised, but she couldn't find a service that would go out there and actually like verify that this projector, worked, that it was in good condition. So she's like, well, you know what? I should have a company that can go out and verify assets. And so here we are today. That was 2019, I think it was started. And we've grown from her and her vision all the way to 140 employees. We have 40,000 lookers, what we call lookers, right? Those are independent consultants that are out there, or independent contractors, sorry, they're out there taking photos for us, filling out information. They all have background checks so that we're not just sending anybody out there to take pictures of your cars or your houses. So yeah, we've seen a lot of growth. Like I mentioned, we're part of another company, Crawford and Company. We were acquired last year, a little over a year ago. So now we have the backing of a large company, and we're seeing even more growth. Our primary space right now is insurance, so we do a lot of auto claims, a lot of property inspections. We've started expanding into the drone market as well. And so whenever there's a catastrophe or something like that, there's a need for drones to go out, take video of large areas and stuff like that. So I don't know, did I do a good job describing? I was looking at, Jing's been at WeGoLook quite a bit longer than I have, so that's why I look at him. So back to kind of the data security. This is kind of the exercise that I went through to try to figure out where we were for GDPR. And so I created this quick little diagram of all the different applications and all of our cloud infrastructure and what data is going where. And this is just to kind of give you an idea of an exercise that you might want to go through if you're thinking about standing something up in the EU or you already have stuff in the EU. I just have the communication protocols here, making sure that everything's secure, how we're communicating, and then what data we're sending where. Part of GDPR is they want to keep the data as much as possible in the EU. But if it travels outside the EU, you need to let them know where it's going, right? And so having this type of documentation, well, a little bit better documentation than this on that will be highly advantageous to everyone.
Can I ask a quick question on this? So I was thinking about kind of our situation in Sonic, because we have a lot of different SDKs in our applications for media attribution, Facebook, Google, AWS Analytics, et cetera. So those are by default, for example, maybe capturing the device ID, and then on top of that, various things that you tag, and then they're firing them not only to your, wherever you send it, and potentially, you know, that there may be another location that it's going. So as you're negotiating through with these different companies that maybe offer those services, can you talk maybe just for a second about what that's like and the accountability between that company and you, or have you been through that yet?
Kind of. At the end of the day, you're all responsible, right? So as the controller, so I'm the one that's getting that data. I'm responsible for the data. Then I'm also responsible for my sub-processors. So that's not in it. So we have an accounting system, right, that we send a lot of our accounting information, all of our finance information. We have our information where we send out notifications to our users. We're responsible for that data, but then again, we have to make sure that they are following the proper data privacy laws as well. So our legal teams talk to their legal teams basically, and make sure that, you know, that all of their compliance is in check. So for us, we're looking for SOC 2, that type of stuff to make sure that their security processes are in place. I don't know if that really answers your question, but at the end of the day, the controller is responsible, and the controller in our case is us, because we're the ones collecting that data. But good question, and thank you. So for us, what our next steps are, we need to revise our disclaimers and get consent, basically, when we're collecting data, right? So within our mobile applications, we need to make it apparent what data we're collecting, where it's going, as well as on our websites and our order forms and all that type of stuff. So we have some homework still to do. We need to be able to provide a mechanism for them to request to be erased, right? So this will probably be part of our website where somebody can come in and request to be erased. Well, just like anybody, we're going through a lot of publishing of policies and procedures. So this will be another policy that we publish with procedures in place to notify of a breach within 72 hours. And then continue to document all of our data points and have that available to our EU clients. Yes, sir.
Is your plan to adopt GDPR data policies for your U.S. data too?
Yeah, we're just going to, yep, that makes the most sense. Thanks for asking that. So the question was, since we're going through all this for GDPR in the EU, are we going to go ahead and do that for the U.S. as well? And the answer is yes. Not only are we looking to expand in the EU and UK, we're also looking to expand in Australia here this year. And so Australia has even stricter laws, right? So we'll be incorporating these amongst others. So great question. Thanks for asking. Yeah, that's what makes the most sense, right? If you're going to go ahead and be secure, might as well be secure across the board.
I think it's interesting to contrast with what Mark Zuckerberg said earlier this week, that he was going to, that Facebook was going to apply GDPR in spirit to US data, but not to the letter of law. I read it, they're going to treat it completely different, right?
Yeah, I read something on that today, and it said that he was going to treat it all the same, but yeah, who knows? But good question. I was going to show you our app. I don't know if there's any appetite for that. I kind of skipped that demo, but to kind of show you the type of data that we capture. Does that interest anybody? We've got time? And the demo gods are willing? Which so far they're not. Any other questions while I'm trying to get this going?
Yeah, now aside from legal and policy changes, are there any changes that you're making to the website or the app itself?
Yeah, so that's the consent, right? So we're not going to change anything as far as like what data we're capturing. We might change how it's stored. So right now, everything that we have is encrypted at rest, right? All of our transport protocols are encrypted. So from a storage perspective, we're doing everything correctly. We might start like tokenizing or randomizing some of the data that we store. But from an app perspective, really the only thing we have to do now is get consent and make it easily available of what actual data that we're capturing, right? So if we're capturing data about a user or a client, we have to let them know in advance what data we're capturing. So it's a lot of just pop-ups in the app of, hey, you know, we're capturing this data. Is that okay? Yes. Does that answer your question? All right, I'm already showing my phone. Good, I hope I don't have anything. Okay, so for us, this is kind of the app. This is me in the app, right? I'm a looker. So about me, we're capturing, you know, information about my address, who I am, email address. This is all personal identifiable information. We also capture W-9 information, right? So social security number, how we pay our lookers, all that type stuff. So that's me as a looker, somebody going out and performing the look. But then we also capture information about what we're going to go look at, right? So you can see here I have a couple of vehicle inspections that need to get done. I have, you know, contact information, so who's that contact, their address, phone numbers, that type stuff. So this is stuff that falls under GDPR, right? We got to protect this data and make sure that it's not accessible, and then get rid of it once we're done with it. So that's kind of it in the nutshell. I just wanted to show you like what type of data we're capturing and why this is relevant to WeGoLook. So like I said, we're expanding into the UK. We already have 2,400 lookers in the UK that can do looks for us. And so our strategy going forward is to stand up all of our infrastructure that we have in the United States in Ireland. So we use all cloud services, or Heroku, Compose for our databases, Cloud AMQP for our RabbitMQ messages. All of those are available in the Ireland region. And so that's kind of the way that we're going about it. But anyway, any questions?
Because of the data minimalization clause, I know a lot of times we get like, hey, we're just going to collect it in case we need it in the future, because you don't always know what questions are going to come up. So how strict are the, you know, business cases that you have to say, this is what I'm going to use it for? Can you say simply like, we might use it, you know, in the future, or is this, because then you always run the risk of losing that historical data, right? So
I think it's, and this is all, I mean, it's still to be determined, right? This is really like loose regulation when you come down to it. I think as long as you can justify a business case for it, then you're going to be able to hold on to it. But if you can't, then you run the risk. And if you can anonymize it, right? So just make sure that it's not, you can't tie it back to an individual, then you're okay, right? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How long do you think it'll be till it comes to the United States?
That's just a big guess right there. I don't think we're going to be doing this anytime soon.
I was going to say, it's slow to market.
The question was, when do I think this is going to come to the United States? And my answer was, I don't really think it's going to happen anytime soon, if it does.
do you want it to come to the United States? So do you want it to come to the United States? As a consumer?
It depends, yeah, it depends if you're a consumer or a company, right?
Yeah.
As a consumer, yes.
What do you know about the auditing procedures?
I still think that's yet to be defined, honestly. We're all kind of just guessing at what needs to happen by this May 25th deadline. And the question was, what do I know about the audit procedures?
So along those lines, maybe as you go, let's say into Australia, is there a process that you go through to say, hey, we already meet this criteria? Do you work with someone there? Do you hire independent auditors? Do you have any idea of how you might tackle something like that?
So the question is, how do you handle this going to like another country like Australia? Do you deal with auditors, or how do you kind of get in there and get the feel for what's going to be acceptable? Is that kind of?
Yeah, it's more how do you know when you go in there, you need to be ready and prepared. So it sounds like there's a process that you might go through.
So we have a lot of lawyers that kind of review what we're doing. I'm not, like I said, I'm not the expert, but we do have some experts, and that's what I would recommend for any company trying to do that. From what I understand, a lot of it has to do with the contracts that you have with the clients that you're going to be performing work for. So in our case, like a large insurance company or something like that in Australia, they would help define what we're going to implement and how stringent do we need to be on the data. Yes, sir.
We come back in like 6 months and tell us how it's going.
Question was, would I come back in 6 months and tell them how it's going? Yes. Any other questions? Sweet. Thanks. Thank you.